Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I am your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And if you've ever struggled with time management and figure out how to prioritize and how you're going to organize your time, this podcast is for you. I'm speaking with Rachel Nielson, and she is the host of the popular parenting podcast, 3 in 30 Takeaways for Moms. She and her guests share 3 actionable takeaways in each 30-minute episode. And we go through quite a bit. Our podcast is a little hair longer than 30 minutes, but you still get some actionable takeaways. We talk about tips to stop obsessing about time. We talk about what does it mean to manage your focus, not your time. And one thing she came up with is containerizing your life. I absolutely love that because it makes a lot of sense to me. So I think you're going to get quite a bit out of this podcast because I know as a new parent, you could be thinking you have 1,000 things on your list. How do you get them done? How do you organize? What do you let go? How can you let go of guilt for not getting things done and take some time to enjoy your life? So this was a really important podcast for me as well, for someone that is often struggling with time management. So I think you're going to enjoy that. Before we get to this podcast conversation, I just want to remind everyone that we still have our classes online. In fact, we've committed to always continuing that and in person. So if you are pregnant or just had a baby, you can take our pre or postnatal classes and our workshops. We've got a ton of workshops from childbirth ed to lactation prep to caring for newborn to CPR. All of that online, on demand, or in person. We've got you covered for many of those things. So you can check out our website, prenatalyogacenter.com, for that. I also have a free offering for all of our listeners. If you go to our website, you can grab the 5 simple solutions to the most common pregnancy pains. And that, of course, does apply to postpartum pains as well. And you'll just have a guide that if you're feeling a little uncomfortable one day and you can't make it to a whole class, this is going to just remind you of what to do to take care of. Maybe it's a backache, a hip ache, chest opening, neck pain. I've got you covered. So you can check that out, grab it, download it, put it somewhere you can take a quick peek when you need it. Also, we have changed some things up. We were planning on coming back in person for our spring teacher training, but given what's happening with COVID right now, we've decided to keep that online. So there's a couple spots left for the January and February training, but then we also opened up an online training for March and April. So you can check that out. If you're really interested in supporting people in the perinatal community, then we've got a very thorough evidence-based training that you can jump into and enjoy. And I look forward to working with you. I think that's it. Okay, so we're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Rachel. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm so great. Thank you for having me here today.
I am really excited to talk to you. I am all about time management, and I know as a new parent that is a challenge. So I'm excited to hear some of your interesting thoughts on how to create balance and time manage as a new parent, because I've listened to your stuff, I've read about you, and you seem to have it going on. So I'm really excited.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I actually feel like because this is so difficult for me, I've had to learn how to do it. So to hear you say it sounds like I have it going on is surprising, but that's just because I've had to work hard at it, because time management is actually not natural for me. I have a personality where I don't really naturally see breaks in my day. Mm-hmm. I can just get going and lose all track of time. So I've had to put some strategies into place to sort of teach myself how to focus better.
Well, it seems to now be working, because from what I've heard of your other interviews and just have been following you, it seems like it's working for you. So good. You've made something that wasn't quite innate, a habit.
Yes.
So I'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho. I have 2 kids. My son is adopted and my daughter was conceived with IVF. So becoming a parent was kind of a long journey for us, and we actually would love to have a 3rd baby. So your podcast is timely for me, even though my kids are 10 and 7. I was listening to your podcast the other day preparing for this interview, and I thought, this is so great for me to revisit all of this because I'm heading right back into it. Hopefully I'm going to do IVF again in a few months. And so I'm excited about that. And then I used to teach high school English until my kids were born, and decided to stay home with them and start my podcast. So that's how I teach now, is through my podcast, which is 3 and 30 Takeaways for Moms. And I love doing it.
I love that you also have a 7 and 10-year-old. That's exactly the same age as my kids. So what a great way to, it is. It's actually a great age. And I also have a lot of respect that you want to start over. So I hope that happens for you. I really sincerely from my heart hope that is something that will come to fruition for you.
Well, thank you.
You are welcome. So, all right, let's talk time management. So I'm really excited to talk about about managing one's time, since I always feel like I'm always focused on my to-do list. I'm focused on my family's schedule. I'm focused on getting something and then some time for myself, which I feel like is not nearly enough. So how has time management been helpful or problematic for you in your life?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the beginning, I have a personality that I'm an overachiever, but I am not naturally organized. And that's kind of that's at odds with each other. And so I would feel this almost like shame of why can't I manage my time better? I'd have all these goals, but it almost felt like my innate personality was working against it. And I did a personality profile from Buffini and Company called the Heritage Profile. And it told me that I am a perpetual, which means that I see time. I'm just going to read you exactly what it says. It says, you do not naturally see time. Rather, you see events in time moving in a perpetual motion from one event to the next. This makes you far more tenacious than others to not give up, to keep going. However, natural break points do not occur for you, such as eating regularly, stopping to go to sleep, or celebrating finished achievements, which can lead to physical or emotional burnout. And that resonated so deeply with me when I read it. I felt seen, that time feels very perpetual to me. And so going back to your original question, the concept of time management had always sort of stressed me out internally. It was something that I aspired to do, but I couldn't seem to get it. And I'd be mad at myself for that. And so I've had to really change the way I even think about time management. I don't really believe that time can be managed. That verb, it's like, makes it sound like time is a naughty child that you have to like manage and discipline. And I sort of tried to make peace with time and just believe that it is abundant and that I can't manage it, but I can choose what I'm going to focus on at any given time. And also that I don't need to manage every single minute of it because it's not this incredibly scarce resource. Because when I had that mindset, it caused nothing but stress and overwhelm in my life. And so I've really tried to rethink that I can't manage time, but I can choose how I focus within my time, if that makes sense.
So it's prioritizing?
Yeah. I mean, it is prioritizing, and it's just, for me, it's less like minutes and hours as like tasks and projects. Like that's easier for me to think like, today, this is my priority project that I will complete. And it's a struggle for me to maintain focus. So I have to keep coming back to it and saying everything else can wait until this project is finished. I'm managing my focus more than I'm managing my time, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense, because I feel like sometimes when I'm a to-do list person. I also get great joy. It's maybe too much out of checking things off my to-do list. It's like, I do too. So sometimes I'm doing my project that my to-do list, and I don't really set like 45 minutes or an hour because I just do what has to be done. But then sometimes it's easy to flip to something else, almost like the focus, maybe a little ADD there that I'm like, I'll do this and then this kind of pulls me or this pulls me so I have to constantly bring myself back to finishing that project.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned ADD, but I do think that is a very real, I've sometimes wondered about myself with ADHD. I've never been diagnosed, but I think this perpetual, that would be common for someone with ADHD. So I think regardless of whether or not you sort of resonate with that diagnosis, I think a lot of women can relate, especially moms, to this sort of, if you give a mouse a cookie of like, you can't stay focused on one thing and you have so many balls in the air that you're like moving from, and you can't really make good progress on anything because you're trying to make progress on everything.
Yes. So I also heard you in one of your other talks, you talked about perpetual, which you just did, but you also talked about finite. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and then the difference between being a perpetual and a finite personality and how that affects perception of time and management?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know as much about finite because I'm in my profile, it said you are perpetual. The other option is finite, but I'm assuming that a more finite personality is somebody who time makes sense to them. Like they are very able to know like, okay, this task is going to take me this long and guess that in the same way as somebody who has a good sense of direction. Mm-hmm. I've heard that you are born with like a sense of time or not, just like you're born with a sense of direction or not. And I do have friends that are like, they can estimate exactly how long something's going to take them. They have a very good sense of time. And I think that is more of a finite personality, whereas this perpetual, it's like time is a nebulous concept. And you can hyper focus and get lost in what you're doing. And so you just kind of have to think about your focus management differently when you have that more perpetual personality. And I think a lot of like what we would consider kind of typical productivity systems and time management systems that are, we hear about on podcasts or sold in planners are probably more for finite personalities or are created by finite personalities. And so there can be that frustration of like, why doesn't this work for me? And the shame of why can't I just follow this system and make it work for me? And so in my mind, I think that's kind of how I have understood that I just experience time differently than other people.
I'm wondering how many listeners right now are like, am I finite? Am I perpetual? And then if they do, because I'm doing the same thing, and I'll reveal what I think I am, but I can also understand if someone resonates with the perpetual and they're just hearing you explain why there might be frustration. Why don't I fit into the system? Why do I get lost in a project and I look up and it's 2 hours later than I had realized? I bet there's a sense of relief to realize it's not them. It's just how they work with time. Because like you said, there could be shaming of like, why can't I get this right? Why does everyone else show up on time and have X, Y, and Z already done? So it feels like it could take a burden off of someone's shoulders of why they're trying to literally fit, what's that saying? Like fit a square in a circular hole. Like it's just not fitting. I think I'm actually finite now because I
feel like people, perpetuals know the minute that I describe this, they know that they're perpetual. And like you said, there's a relief of even having a word for it. Yeah. Because that's how I felt when I read that personality profile. I'd never had a word for it. And when I read it, I thought, okay, that's why. And the few times that I've described it on my Instagram stories or on my podcast, people will say, oh my gosh, that is me. It's like they know immediately.
Yeah, I think I'm finite because I have a sense of how long things will take. And I think habit, like over the pandemic, I was sending out the links for our classes and I didn't even have to look at the clock, but my body's like, oh, it's around 5. You have to do that. I also, full disclosure, I usually have a glass of wine around that time. And even if I'm not at home, my body's like, oh, I think it's 5. I think you should be like, it's like a little inside, like ding. So I think I'm a finite. So
I'm jealous.
No, it's not always good because I also wake up at the same time every day. And I'm like, oh, even on the weekends. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
So what are some tips to stop obsessing about time? Because I definitely heard of people, especially with kids, they're trying to fit so much in, or their kids are at the age where they're at school and they only have a really finite amount of time to get stuff done. And then it's like an obsession about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we as a society use a lot of words that have a lot of, they're sort of morally charged around time, like wasting time and things like that. It's like, can time really be wasted? Time just is. But we're like so down on ourselves. And like, I wasted this afternoon by reading a book or by getting distracted by my phone. And obviously there's ways that it's all choice. It's all how you chose to use your time that day. And we don't need to attach so much morality to it. And we can give ourselves grace around, okay, maybe I didn't consciously choose to take that break on my phone. Maybe I just got swept into it and I wish I hadn't made that choice. But I think releasing the like pressure and the obsession around like, I have to use every minute well.
To be productive. I think it's an obsession with productivity.
Yes. And it's so stressful. So as far as how to sort of do that, I think one way to do it is to come up with some empowering beliefs about time and sort of repeat them to yourself as a mantra, as a daily reminder. You can write them down at the beginning of the day. Sometimes I do like a journaling practice where I'll just write down a whole bunch of affirmations at the beginning of the day, and I'll write down, I have plenty of time for everything that matters. And that's just a very empowering thought versus there's never enough time. You know, I have plenty of time for everything that matters. Doesn't mean I have plenty of time for everything, but I get to decide what matters and do that. You know, so you could choose whatever empowering thought about time resonates with you and just make it part of your daily practice to rewire the automatic thoughts that you have about time being scarce, and just try to remember that we can think of time as a more abundant resource and be grateful for it instead of like hoarding it and feeling like it's so scarce.
Yeah, I'm processing that, because what I'm hearing and I'm wanting to do more of is recognize, because I do feel like sometimes I do get obsessed with the productivity, but recognizing what you said is what is important to you. Make time for what is like, put that ahead of the small tasks that maybe can wait till the next day, or maybe you don't even have to get done at all. And let go of every minute needs to be used to its fullest. Like there is something beautiful about just kind of sitting and chilling, as opposed to, I should be looking this up. I should be doing this. I should be calling this person. I should be taking a walk. Well, that's actually, I like taking walks. But I hear,
well, it's just it's more of a feeling of ease within time. Like I feel like I'm not saying do less necessarily. I mean, you can do the same amount of stuff while just having a more relaxed internal
soften the grip
dialogue going and loosen the grip. Exactly. Of just, I'm going through my day. I'm doing the things that matter to me. And there's a lot of them, but I have plenty of time for everything that matters. And I don't need to feel this panicked feeling inside all day long, which I have been there, where it's just like, not enough time. And that doesn't help anything.
Right. And I'm just thinking about brand new parents that they may only have like an hour when their baby's asleep and they think they have to get a ton done. I say this from having been there myself. So what would you say to that person that there's stuff they want to get done, they only have an hour until they're kind of back on baby duty?
Yeah, I would be as deliberate as possible before you have that hour about how you want to use that hour. And just think about, so maybe first thing in the morning, it could be before your baby's up, or it could even be as they're up and they're just kind of playing at your feet or you're rocking them or whatever. Think about what is the most important thing to me today to get done during that hour. Is it something productive, work or otherwise, or is it some self-care time and rest and reading a book. And you sort of have to tap into your body and your intuition to know the difference. But to decide that ahead of time, so when you get to that hour, you just know, like you just go, and start that thing instead of having the 15-minute process of wandering around, doing a little housework, looking at your phone, wondering how you should use it. So getting clear on your priorities beforehand, I think, is really helpful with that precious nap time.
Yeah, no, that is a great idea. I like that of thinking ahead of time, because you're absolutely right. Like the child goes down and then it's almost like deer in headlights of like, now what? And then we just watch, the time kind of slips away yeah, I like that. Think ahead of time. All right. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, you had mentioned a word I hadn't heard of, containerize. So when we come back, if you can explain, what does it mean to containerize your life? We'll be right back.
Looks like you need a vacation. Enter the 5-Hour Energy Where Will the Tide Take You sweepstakes. You could win a $10,000 dream beach vacation. Imagine jet setting off to a tropical paradise, having fun in the sun, or diving at a gorgeous reef. It's up to you. No purchase necessary. Go to 5HETide.com for official rules and to enter. That's 5HETide.com. Enter today. Ends June 30th, 2024.
All right. So what does it mean to containerize your life?
Well, I don't know if this is a real word. I think I made it up.
I like it.
So I have several friends who are professional organizers and have helped me do my whole house. I'm super lucky. And pantries and closets and cupboards and all of it. And they're all obsessed with bins. They're all obsessed with containers. And they have taught me that everything needs to have a place and a container that that it goes. And I thought about that in the concept of time management and the way that we live our lives, because if the purpose of having that container in a physical space is not just to keep things like looking pretty. It's also to keep things separate from each other so that they don't overflow into everything else. It gives you a visual reminder of when you have too much of something. When we did my closet, I had an overflowing container of socks, and I was like, oh, I guess I need to get rid of some socks. I had never realized it when they weren't containerized because they were just in the drawer, kind of filling up the drawer. But then when we put the containers in there, I'm like, oh, that is too much. And I think that this is really important with time, managing your focus and, dividing up your day into some containers to know when you should be doing what. You may have heard people talk about like a block schedule where it's more of a flexible routine around, from these hours, around these hours after nap time is when I will make dinner every night. So it's not exact minutes, but it's a little container around when you will do those tasks. This is when I will do my work time. This is when I will just focus on the baby, and really try to truly honor your containers instead of letting everything sort of slide and mix into everything else, especially if you are working from home. That can be really tricky. And all of a sudden you don't realize that your work is overflowing into everything else. And I've actually had that experience in the last couple of years, the opposite of, my family time overflowing into my work time because of the pandemic and having my kids home. And all of it, I'm like, I'm not getting my dedicated work time because I'm like, oh, it's okay. I can help them with this for a little while and I can run them to this friend's house and whatever. And I'm not honoring my work container. And then I'm dropping balls. I'm frustrated that I don't have more progress there. And so just coming back to like, this is my container for work, these hours, this portion of the day, and I'm not going to schedule other things during that time. And if my kids ask me, they can, do whatever during that time, I'm going to honor the container and say, no, this is my work time, and stick to it. And it really does bless the whole family when you have more clear divisions like that. Because then there's just this sort of natural rhythm, and the kids know what to expect, when your day is, more divided like that, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. It's boundaries as well, and asking everyone to respect your boundaries. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I did find the pandemic a very, because our kids are the same age. So I know what you're going through, because they were not old enough to at least mine were not old, didn't feel old enough to be like, good luck on your own. But they were still in school. But it's interesting when you're talking about the containerizing, because that resonated with me. For a long time, I would let my work flow into the evening. And then I would just kind of throw myself into bed exhausted. And I didn't have a container of unwinding time. And starting about 6-7 months ago, I put an hour and a half before bed as no work, unless it was like a true emergency, which didn't often happen, but no work. And it was downtime. I would read, or my husband and I would Netflix, or, whatever, some movie or whatever. But I put that as the work is closed, that container is closed until tomorrow. And I sleep better and my mind is clearer, because I think the container was just like, spilling all over the place. It wasn't well organized.
Yeah. Oh, I so relate. And it's easy to not even notice, when there is no container. You don't notice how much things are overflowing. And then suddenly you're like, wait a second, I have no downtime at the end of the day. Like, how did that happen? And kind of adding it back in consciously and looking at your life and saying, how can I create balance around what I am doing every day and how I'm spending my time in ways that matter to me?
Well, let's talk about balance. So when you notice that you're feeling out of balance and your time management is off, what ways do you bring yourself back to balance?
Yeah, well, this happens for me a lot. I am not a pro, so I have a lot of practice around like getting out of balance and realizing, gosh, I am not respecting my containers. I'm back to my perpetual ways. And I think that one thing that helps me sort of find balance again is just doing a massive brain dump of everything, sheet of paper, write down everything that's in my mind of to-dos and the things that are worrying me. And once it's out, again, this is really similar to what professional organizers have you do. They have you take everything out of a space before you organize it. And so you can see it all and you can inventory it and you can decide what deserves to go back in and into your containers. And so it's like doing that with your brain, of getting it all out and looking at it and saying, what container does this go into? What about this? Does it even deserve to be in there? Should I get rid of it? Should I delegate it? And sort of restoring the balance to your mental space like you would to a physical space, like a closet that had gotten overcrowded, And I have a very organized closet because I have a friend that helped me do this, but that doesn't mean that I never have to do a reset.
Right.
I have the system in there. I have the bins in there and everything, but sometimes it gets out of control and I have to sort of, okay, we got to look at this. Exactly. What's going on here? Dump it all out, look at it all, put it back in the closet and straighten it up. And we have to do that with our lives too. And just say things have gotten out of balance and how can I bring it back to, a balance, a harmony that feels good for our family.
Yes. And I also appreciate that you're recognizing what feels good for your family, because what works for one family and what balances one family may not balance another. So it's really finding that personal rhythm. I do like what you said about the brain dump. I do that a lot, where I just have to throw the stuff in my brain on my calendar or I have a notebook that I use. And once it's out, then I know I can come back to it. But if I don't write it down, then it's just like poking me in my brain. It's like, don't forget this, don't forget this. And so if I write it down, I don't have to then hold on to it. So I appreciate that brain dump. So
that was me in the middle of the night last night. I literally got out of bed at 2 a.m. because I just kept spinning. I'm like, brain dump time. And I dumped it all out. And then I'm like, we'll come back to this in the morning. And I went back to bed. So
I'm so glad I'm not the only one. I have done that. I stumble downstairs to my office. I write it down. I'd say a good 80% of the time I can reread what I wrote. And then about 20% of the time, like, what does that say? But yes, I've done that too. And it creates almost permission, like you can let it go and now go back to bed. Because if I don't, I'll be thinking, don't forget this, don't forget this. And then I just chew on it more and more. Oh, you made me happy to know I'm not the only crazy person that does that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it's holidays coming up or what, but it's been a week where I'm just it's been off. Everything's felt off. And so I had the spinning brain. I had to get it all out yesterday.
Yes, I love that. So how do you introduce and work with creating routines for the family or the individual?
So especially if creating routines is not easy for you, like it isn't for me, I think it's important to start really, really small. And one of my favorite methods for that is I had a guest on my podcast. His name is BJ Fogg. He is a researcher at Stanford, and he's done like 30 years of research on behavior, like how people change, basically, how habits are formed and what works and what doesn't. And he has a method called the ABC method, and A stands for anchor, B stands for behavior, and C stands for celebrate. And so he teaches choose an anchor, which is usually something that you're already doing, that is an anchor in your everyday routine, and connect a tiny behavior to it, the tiniest thing. And his book is actually called Tiny Habits. And he's like very tiny, like the smallest thing, and then celebrate when you do it. And he said people really miss that last step most of all. We feel a little foolish celebrating ourselves. And, but that research shows that even a small little moment of, like he says, like say out loud, I'm awesome, or like, yes, or, like smile, or do something that'll make you laugh, like a little victory dance or something. It cements that habit and that routine in, and then you can start to stack, and you can add another behavior onto that as an anchor and another behavior. And that's when you build a routine. And so an example for me, I have a good habit now of right when I walk in the door from dropping my kids off at school. So that's something that I have to do every day. I know it will happen. I'm taking them to school. So there will be the moment when I walk back in my door. So that's my anchor. I go over and I take my vitamins first thing. So that's my tiny habit that I've connected to the anchor. And then I celebrate and I say, I'm awesome, or I'm going to have a great day, or something. And then I've attached other behaviors onto that now, where the next thing that I do is I go and I grab my scriptures and I read scripture for 10 or 15 minutes. And then I say, I'm awesome, and so you're just slowly, you build a routine by attaching to other habits that you're doing consistently. And you have to start really, really small. You can't you can't put together like a 12 or 20 step thing. Like BJ would say, just start with one. A, B, C, don't add anything else. Do only vitamins or whatever. Celebrate, really cement it in for a few weeks, and then start to stack and add them on to build that routine.
I like that. I'm in my brain thinking about anchors and behaviors and celebrations. I'm going to think with that one for a while to see what I can create.
I mean, things like going to the bathroom. I mean, things that you will do. So he's like, every time I go to the bathroom, I do 2 push-ups. That's one of his.
Oh.
And, and then I celebrate and say I'm awesome. So start to look around in your daily life and notice like the things that you have to do anyway, and then attach a behavior that's something that you want to do, and then start to stack them up.
I do have one that on the days that I'm not in the city teaching, I'm home and I work from home. So my husband takes my daughter to school. And so by the time they leave, I like to clean the kitchen. And then once everything's clean, because I like everything clean and put away, then I celebrate by having breakfast by myself, which I really enjoy. And
that's great.
I watch a little Downton Abbey usually. And then I put everything clean up and I start my work. But it's that 10, 15 minutes of alone time of eating. Because then if I eat first, I'm like, I still have to clean. So I clean, and then the celebration is I have some downtime. So I see where you're saying that I'd have to clean anyway, but why not have a celebration after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Although I think BJ would say that you don't necessarily have to clean after. You do it because you choose to.
True.
And so that's a good habit that you formed. But like the best anchors are things that literally you can't get through your day without doing, such as going to the bathroom.
True.
Or, drinking a glass of water or whatever, like those physical things that you then can attach to. So just to get your audience thinking, especially if they're like me and they feel like they don't have a lot of existing good routines, then to build off of, just start with things that are like biological imperatives. Like you have to get out of bed every morning. So when your feet hit the ground, what do you want to do? Do you want to say an affirmation? Do you want something to build a habit that is conscious after that anchor behavior happens?
I do like the going to the bathroom. I don't know if push-ups would be what I would choose, but it's a non-negotiable, like it's going to happen. And then we have, especially we think of the community, this is for the pregnant person, they are going to the bathroom often.
A lot.
So yeah, I'm just thinking about,
about like brand new moms, like their lives are so chaotic and busy and different, and they're meeting their baby's needs all day long, but they're going to go to the bathroom, at some point. So that's a really good one to build off of.
Oh, okay. So community, I would love you to reach out and let me know what you are choosing while you go to the bathroom. What is your new habit? What is your reward? I'm curious to hear when we get back. I'll let you know. All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new and expecting parents? We'll be right back. Okay, so you have worked in this community for a while. You have 2 kids of your own. What is one final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new or expecting parents?
Yeah, I had a really rough start to the beginning of my motherhood in that my expectations didn't meet my reality. I had fought hard for these babies. And I thought that I would love every minute of it. And my son, who's adopted, was colicky and cried all day long. And I found myself really discouraged because here I had fought for this miracle baby and I was not loving it. And I was disillusioned. I felt lost. I felt bad that I wasn't loving it. And I would say that first year was really a difficult time for me. And it was during that time that a motherhood mentor of mine told me, she said, I kind of confided this in her, and she said to me, in motherhood, the hard moments sometimes outnumber the beautiful moments, but the beautiful moments always outweigh the hard moments. And that really stuck with me, that it wasn't about the number of hard days or like the perfect moments with my baby. If I could hold on to those and notice those and absorb those and give them the weight that they deserved, that they would outweigh the hard things. And I started a practice that I called Flecks of Gold, where I looked for just a little fleck of gold moment that I shared with my baby every day, or even by myself, like after baby was down and I had like a really relaxing lunch by myself or whatever. Just that moment where it felt like my soul could breathe for a second. And it was like, okay, I can get through this. This is worth it. Some days there were tons of flecks of gold. Other days I had to try hard to even think of one. But I started writing them down, and it really pulled me out of that low, hard place I was in as a new mom. And so this is a practice that I recommend to all the women in the 3 and 30 community. I've actually created a journal just for this practice called Flecks of Gold, where you can track those. And it's a 3-year journal. So it's kind of like a time hop where you write down your golden memory on that day. And then the next year on the same day, you get to read your golden memory from the year before when you add your new one. And so it's just this constant reinforcer of like, motherhood is beautiful and this is worth doing. Even when it's hard, the beautiful moments outweigh the hard moments. And so that would be my advice for any new moms listening, to look for the flecks of gold.
I also appreciate you bringing to light a real situation that many, many, many parents have of really wanting or being invested in having a child, and then saying to yourself, wow, I know I wanted this, but this is hard. I don't know if I like it all the time. And I feel like that could be a whole other conversation, but it is real and people often feel shame around that. And so anytime that we can pull the curtain back on something that might feel shameful, that is very common, I think is important. So I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, because I think a lot of people will hear that and recognize that, and again, feel a sense of relief of, I'm not the only one. Thank you. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So where can people find your work?
Yeah. So my podcast is 3 in 30 Takeaways for Moms. You can find it on any podcast app. And I always try to give 3 actionable takeaways in every 30-minute episode. That's why it's called 3 in 30. And if women are interested in that Flecks of Gold journal, you can go to 3in30podcast.com/Flecks of Gold. And that's where you can find that.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I got a lot out of this, and it was really fun speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.